The legend awakens. Julius Caesar. The shadow before dawn. Commercially, everyone arrives cold and grey over the 7 hills of Rome. Mist rises from the Tiber River like breath from a sleeping beast, curling through narrow streets where vendors begin to stir and merchants prepare their wares. In the homes of senators and patricians across the city, slaves light oil lamps against the pre-dawn darkness, while their masters dress in togas edged with purple, preparing for another day in the forum. But this day carries a weight unlike any other. This is the 15th of March in the year 44 before the Common Era, a date the Romans call the Ides of March, and something dangerous hangs in the air like the scent of distant thunder. In the villa across the Tiber, in a room decorated with Egyptian splendor, Cleopatra VII of Egypt wakes and finds her bed empty. Caesar has already risen, as he always does, long before the sun breaches the horizon. She knows where he has gone, to his study, to read dispatches from distant provinces, to plan his upcoming campaign against Parthia. The man never stops. Even in their most intimate moments, she can see the wheels of his mind turning, calculating, strategizing, planning 3 moves ahead of everyone else. It is what makes him Caesar. It is also, she fears, what might destroy him. Suppressing the city in another villa, Marcus Junius Brutus sits in darkness, staring at the dagger concealed beneath his robes. Sleep has eluded him for weeks. The blade feels impossibly heavy, though it weighs no more than any other weapon he has carried in battle. But this blade will not be used against Rome's enemies. This blade will strike at the heart of Rome itself. At the heart of the man who pardoned him, promoted him, trusted him. The man who may be his father. Brutus closes his eyes and sees his ancestor Lucius Junius Brutus, who expelled the last king from Rome 5 centuries ago. The whispers have found him in every corner of the city. You are not truly Brutus. You are asleep, Brutus. The Republic is dying, they say. Only you can save it. Only blood can wash away tyranny. Gaius Cassius Longinus paces in his atrium, watching the stars fade as dawn approaches. Unlike Brutus, he feels no hesitation. Caesar wronged him, slighted him, stole his lions for political theater. More than that, Caesar has stolen the Republic itself, replacing 500 years of tradition with the rule of one man. Cassius fought against Caesar at Pharsalus, was pardoned, was made praetor, and has watched Caesar gather all power to himself like a miser hoarding gold. Today, that ends. Today, Rome takes back what is hers. In the temple of Venus Genetrix, where Caesar had a golden statue of Cleopatra erected, incense still smolders from the previous night's offerings. Caesar claimed descent from Venus through Aeneas, and now he displays his foreign mistress as the goddess incarnate. The scandal has provided his enemies with endless ammunition. A Roman cannot marry a foreigner, yet Caesar flaunts their son, Caesarion, before all Rome. He accepts divine honors. He sits on a golden throne in the Senate. The month of his birth has been renamed in his honor. He has been appointed Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. Every step he takes resembles the path of a king, though he refuses that title. Perhaps because he knows that Romans hate kings more than they hate anything else in this world. The soothsayer who warned Caesar has spent the night in prayer. Spurina the haruspex examined the entrails of sacrificial animals and saw disaster. He told Caesar plainly, "Danger comes, and it will not pass until the Ides of March have ended." Caesar laughed in his face. Caesar laughs at everything. The man has no fear, or if he does, he has learned to hide it behind that famous smile and those quick, cutting jokes that leave his opponents floundering. But Spurina knows what he saw. The gods speak in blood and smoke, and what they showed him was the end of something great and the beginning of something terrible. Calpurnia Pisonis, Caesar's wife, wakes from nightmares screaming. She dreamed his body in her arms, streaming with blood, torn and broken. She dreamed the pediment of their house crashing down, smashing into ruins. She has sent slaves to the house of every priest in Rome, begging them to examine the omens again. When Caesar enters their chamber to say goodbye, she throws herself at his feet. "Do not go to the Senate today. Stay home, rest. The priests say the omens are bad. Please, husband, please. Just this once, listen." But Caesar only smiles and kisses her forehead gently. He has heard such warnings before. Danger follows power like a shadow follows the sun. He will not be cowed by superstition. He will not show weakness to his enemies. The Senate awaits, and Caesar has never hidden from anything in his life. At the theatre of Pompey, where the Senate will meet today while their usual chamber undergoes renovation, the conspirators gather in small groups, trying to appear casual. 60 men share the secret, maybe 70. That so many have kept quiet is either a miracle or a sign that the gods themselves approve. They have planned meticulously. Gladiators owned by Decimus Brutus wait in the portico nearby, ready to protect the assassins if Caesar's guards intervene. Each conspirator has concealed daggers beneath his toga. They will strike during the meeting, in front of everyone, making it clear that this is not murder, but tyrannicide, not crime, but justice. They will kill the tyrant and restore the republic. History will remember them as heroes. But what history remembers and what history forgets is not for mortals to decide. The gods laugh at the plans of men, and fate has threads already woven that no mortal hand can alter. Before this day ends, Rome will stand at a crossroads. The republic that has endured for nearly 5 centuries will receive a mortal wound from which it will never recover. And the man who will die today, the man whose blood will stain the marble floors of Pompey's theatre, is the same man who spent his entire life climbing from the streets of Rome to stand as its undisputed master. How did he do it? How does any man rise so high? How does a boy born into a noble family with an empty treasury become the most powerful figure in the known world? To understand the fall, we must first understand the rise. To comprehend the tragedy that unfolds today, we must travel back 56 years, to the summer when Rome was young and Caesar was just a crying infant in his mother's arms, with nothing but a name and a destiny waiting to be claimed. Born into turmoil. Schizophrene. The year is 100 before the Common Era, and Rome stands as the undisputed power of the Mediterranean world. Her legions have crushed Carthage, conquered Greece, and expanded her territories from Spain to Asia Minor. Yet for all her external triumphs, Rome is rotting from within. The old republic, built on the virtue of farmer soldiers who served for a season and then returned to their fields, has been replaced by something darker. Professional armies now fight not for Rome, but for generals who pay them. Slaves pour into Italy by the hundreds of thousands, displacing free farmers who once formed the backbone of Roman society. The gap between rich and poor yawns wider each year, and violence has become the language of politics. Into this world of splendor and decay, on the 12th or 13th of July, a child is born to Aurelia Cotta in the Subura district of Rome. The Subura is not where patricians typically raise their families. It is cramped, loud, dangerous, a tangle of narrow streets where taverns and brothels stand beside tenement buildings that regularly collapse or burn. But the Julian family, though ancient and proud, does not have the wealth to afford better. They claim descent from Iulus, son of Aeneas, which means they trace their lineage back to the goddess Venus herself. These are impressive bloodlines, the kind that open doors in Roman society, but bloodlines do not pay rent or buy bread. The Julii have more history than money, more pride than power. The boy is named Gaius Julius Caesar, and from his first breath he enters a world of civil war. His uncle by marriage, Gaius Marius, is one of Rome's greatest generals, a man who saved the Republic from Germanic invaders, but who has since turned his ambition toward controlling Rome itself. Opposing him is Lucius Cornelius Sulla, another brilliant general, backed by the Optimates, the conservative aristocrats who believe the Senate should rule supreme. These two men and their factions will spend Caesar's childhood slaughtering each other in the streets of Rome, staining the Forum with Roman blood, posting prescription lists that condemn thousands to death. Young Caesar watches from the Subura as bodies float down the Tiber and severed heads are displayed in the Forum. This is the education of his youth, this bloody lesson that power in Rome belongs to those strong enough to seize it and ruthless enough to hold it. His father, also named Gaius Julius Caesar, serves as praetor and governor of Asia, a respectable but not spectacular career for a man of his family. He brings his young son with him to the province, showing him how Rome governs her vast empire, how power flows from the center to the periphery, how a Roman magistrate can hold the power of life and death over millions. Then, when Caesar is only 16 years old, his father dies suddenly in Pisae. The boy is barely a man, still learning how to navigate Roman politics, when he suddenly becomes head of the family. Responsibility settles on his shoulders like iron armor. He must now protect his mother Aurelia and his sisters Julia Major and Julia Minor. He must make decisions. He must become a man before he is ready. And the first decision thrust upon him tests everything he believes about honor and courage. Sulla has won the civil war against Marius and has declared himself dictator of Rome. He is purging his enemies systematically, creating prescription lists that mean immediate death for anyone whose name appears. To consolidate power, Sulla orders prominent young men to divorce their wives if those wives have connections to the Marian faction. Caesar married Cornelia, daughter of Marius's supporter Cinna, when he was just a boy. Now Sulla demands he divorce her or lose his inheritance, his priesthood, and possibly his life. Most men would bend. Most men would recognize that Sulla holds absolute power and that defiance means destruction. But Caesar looks at this dictator, who claims to defend Roman tradition, and sees only a tyrant. He refuses. A 16-year-old boy, with no army and no fortune, looks Rome's most powerful man in the eye and says no. The word echoes through Roman politics like a thunderclap. Sulla strips away Caesar's inheritance and his position as a priest. Caesar flees Rome before Sulla can order his execution, joining the army in Asia Minor to escape the dictator's reach. Friends and family plead with Sulla to spare the boy. Sulla eventually relents, but with a warning that proves prophetic. He tells them they are fools if they cannot see many a Marius in this boy. In the army, Caesar transforms himself. He serves under Marcus Thermus during the siege of Mytilene and distinguishes himself so thoroughly that he is awarded the civic crown, the Corona Civica, one of Rome's highest military honors. This wreath of oak leaves is given only to soldiers who save the life of a fellow citizen in battle. Caesar wears it proudly, knowing that earning it required him to risk his own life while the enemy still held the field. The young man who fled Rome in disgrace returns as a decorated war hero. But the return must wait, because Sulla still controls Rome with an iron fist, and Caesar's defiance has not been forgotten. He remains with the army, serving in Cilicia, gaining experience in command, learning the rhythms of military life. When news finally arrives that Sulla has died in 78 BCE, Caesar boards a ship for Rome. The dictator's death has created a power vacuum, and Caesar smells opportunity in the chaos. But fate has other plans. Pirates attack his ship near the island of Pharmacusa and take Caesar prisoner. They demand a ransom of 20 talents of silver, a substantial sum. Caesar bursts out laughing. The pirates stare at this young Roman noble, confused by his reaction. Caesar tells them they are insulting him. He is worth at least 50 talents. Increase the ransom, he demands. Do not undervalue me. The pirates, bemused and somewhat charmed by their prisoner's audacity, agree. For 38 days, Caesar lives among these pirates as they wait for the ransom to arrive. He does not cower or beg. He treats them as if he is their leader rather than their prisoner. He exercises, writes poetry, makes speeches, and forces them to listen. When they show insufficient appreciation for his verses, he calls them illiterate barbarians to their faces. They laugh. This Roman noble is unlike any prisoner they have held before. He jokes with them, plays games, participates in their sports. But he also makes them a promise. "When I am free," he tells them, "I will return with a fleet. I will hunt you down. I will crucify every one of you." They laugh harder. Such threats are amusing when they come from a prisoner with no weapons and no freedom. The ransom arrives. Caesar is freed. He travels directly to Miletus, raises a fleet, sails back to Pharmacusa, and captures the entire pirate band. He takes them to Pergamon and has them crucified, just as he promised. But because he spent 38 days among them, and they treated him reasonably well as a prisoner, he shows mercy. Before the crucifixion, he has their throats cut so they die quickly, rather than lingering in agony for days. This combination of absolute determination, ruthless efficiency, and calculated mercy becomes Caesar's trademark. He promises something, and he delivers. He makes a threat, and he follows through. People learn quickly that this man means exactly what he says, every time, without exception. Returning to Rome at last, Caesar begins his political career. In 70 BCE, he delivers the funeral oration for his aunt Julia, wife of Marius. This is his chance to announce himself to Rome's people, and he seizes it brilliantly. In his speech, he traces his family ancestry back to Venus and Aeneas, claiming divine blood in his veins. More importantly, he launches a passionate defense of Marius and the Populares faction, the political group that champions the common people against the optimates aristocrats. This is not just rhetoric. This is Caesar nailing his colors to the mast, declaring openly that he stands with the people against the Senate's conservative elite. The speech is bold, dangerous, and politically astute. It wins him immediate recognition among the plebeians who remember Marius as their hero. Caesar embarks on the cursus honorum, the sequence of offices every Roman politician must climb. He serves as a military tribune, then wins election as quaestor in 69 BCE, earning himself a seat in the Senate. He travels to further Spain as quaestor, where legend says he saw a statue of Alexander the Great and wept. "Alexander conquered the world by Caesar's age," he supposedly said, "and I have accomplished nothing." Whether the story is true or not, it captures something essential about Caesar's character. He looks at the greatest achievements in history and measures himself against them. He is not content to be a respectable senator, a competent general, a prominent citizen. He wants his name to echo through the centuries, alongside Alexander, alongside the heroes of old. He wants glory that will never fade. But glory requires resources, and Caesar still lacks the one thing every ambitious politician needs: money. He borrows extensively, plunging himself deep into debt to fund the games and spectacles expected of rising politicians. He is elected curule aedile in 65 BCE and immediately spends a fortune on gladiatorial games, wild beast hunts, and public festivals that dazzle the Roman people. The debt grows enormous. His creditors circle like sharks. But Caesar understands something his critics do not. The Roman people love spectacle, and they remember politicians who entertain them. More importantly, Caesar is building something more valuable than gold. He is building his reputation. He is building loyalty. And when the time comes to collect on those invisible debts, when he needs the people's votes and the people's support, they will remember the man who gave them the greatest shows Rome has ever seen. His personal life remains complex. After Cornelia died in 69 BCE, Caesar remarried to Pompeia, granddaughter of Sulla. But that marriage ends in scandal when a political enemy sneaks into Caesar's house disguised as a woman during the festival of Bona Dea, where men are forbidden. Rumors spread that Pompeia was involved in an affair. Caesar divorces her, saying that his wife must be above suspicion. This becomes another famous saying attributed to him, another demonstration of his absolute standards. He will forgive enemies in war, show mercy to defeated foes, but he will not tolerate any stain on his personal honor or that of his family. In 63 BCE, Caesar goes to election to Pontifex Maximus, the head of Rome's state religion, despite being younger than tradition allows and less wealthy than his competitors. He accomplishes this through brilliant political maneuvering and by mobilizing the voters who support him. From this position of religious authority, combined with his growing political power, Caesar begins to emerge as one of Rome's most formidable politicians. But he remains in the shadow of greater men. Pompey the Great commands immense prestige as Rome's most successful general. Marcus Crassus possesses Rome's greatest fortune. These two men tower over Roman politics, while Caesar struggles to rise from their shadow. Then, in 60 BCE, Caesar orchestrates the most important political move of his career. He approaches Pompey and Crassus with a proposal. The three of them should form an alliance, pooling their strength to dominate Roman politics. Pompey brings military glory and popular support. Crassus brings vast wealth. Caesar brings political cunning and tireless energy. Together, they become what historians will later call the First Triumvirate, though no one in Rome uses that term. It is an unofficial alliance, a private agreement between three ambitious men to help each other achieve their goals. The Senate, dominated by conservative optimates who distrust all three, can do nothing to stop them. Caesar engineers his election as consul for 59 BCE, and now, with Pompey's veterans and Crassus's money behind him, he is unstoppable. His year as consul is revolutionary. He pushes through land redistribution laws to benefit Pompey's veterans. He secures Pompey's political settlements in the east. He helps Crassus reduce the tax burden on companies he supports. Caesar marries his daughter Julia to Pompey, cementing their alliance with a family bond. And most importantly, Caesar secures for himself the governorship of Cisalpine Gaul and Transalpine Gaul, along with Illyricum, for 5 years with command of 4 legions. This is the foundation he needs. This is the army that will make him great. This is where his real story begins. He is 40 years old when he leaves Rome for Gaul in 58 BCE. He has climbed from the streets of the Subura to the heights of Roman power through intelligence, courage, political genius, and sheer determination. He has defied dictators, made fortunes in debt, earned military glory, formed alliance with Rome's most powerful men. But everything he has accomplished thus far is merely prologue. What comes next will transform him from a successful politician into a legend. What comes next is 8 years of the most brutal warfare Rome has ever known. 8 years that will conquer an entire region, destroy millions of lives, and create the most loyal army any general has ever commanded. What comes next is Gaul, the conquest of blood and glory. The Romans call it Gallia, a vast territory stretching from the Alps to the Rhine, from the Mediterranean to the shores of the distant ocean that Romans believe encircles the world. It encompasses what will one day be called France, Belgium, parts of Germany, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. The land is rich, the tribes are numerous and warlike, and the potential for glory is limitless. Caesar arrives with 4 legions, roughly 20,000 men, and a mandate to protect Rome's interests in the region. What he will do instead is conquer the entire territory, plunge Gaul into 8 years of relentless warfare, and create a military reputation that will rival any general in history. He does not need to look far for his first campaign. In the spring of 58 BCE, the Helvetii tribe, living in what is now Switzerland, decides to migrate westward through Roman territory. They number over 300,000 people, a quarter of them warriors, seeking richer lands away from Germanic pressure. Caesar refuses them permission to cross through the Roman province of Narbonensis. The Helvetii attempt to do so anyway. Caesar marches his legions north at astonishing speed, catches the migrants at the Saône River, and slaughters thousands of them as they attempt to cross. The survivors flee. Caesar pursues. The Romans fight the main Helvetian force near modern Bibracte. The battle rages all day. The Helvetii fight with desperate courage, but Roman discipline and Caesar's tactical genius prevail. When sunset comes, the surviving Helvetii surrender. Caesar forces them to return to their homeland and rebuild their destroyed settlements, ensuring that this region will not be left empty for Germanic tribes to fill. The campaign establishes Caesar's reputation immediately. He moves faster than anyone expects, fights harder than anyone predicts, and shows ruthless determination in pursuit of victory. Gallic chieftains take notice. Some seek alliance with Rome, others plot resistance. Caesar uses both responses to expand his influence and his command. When Germanic tribes under King Ariovistus cross the Rhine and threaten Gallic allies of Rome, Caesar uses this as justification to march into the heart of Gaul. He defeats Ariovistus in battle, drives the Germanic tribes back across the Rhine, and establishes Roman authority far beyond the province's traditional borders. In a single campaign season, Caesar has achieved what no Roman governor before him even attempted. The following year, 57 BCE, Caesar turns his attention north to the Belgae, the fierce tribes inhabiting the region between the Seine and Rhine rivers. These warriors are considered the bravest and most warlike of all Gauls. They mass an army that Caesar claims numbers nearly 300,000 warriors, though modern historians suspect this number is greatly exaggerated. Caesar's propaganda always inflates enemy numbers to make his victories seem more impressive. Regardless of actual numbers, Belgae are formidable opponents. They besiege one of Caesar's camps. Caesar relieves the siege, then pursues the Belgae back to their territory. Battle after battle follows. The Nervii nearly defeat Caesar's army at the Sabis River, catching the Romans by surprise while they are building camp. Caesar himself grabs a shield and fights in the front lines, rallying his terrified soldiers and turning near disaster into hard-fought victory. By the end of the campaigning season, the Belgae have submitted to Roman authority. Caesar has extended Roman power all the way to the Rhine and even beyond. In 56 BCE, Caesar deals with tribes along the Atlantic coast. These coastal peoples possess formidable naval power, something Romans are unused to facing in Gaul. The Veneti, in particular, control the seas with their heavy, seaworthy ships, designed for the treacherous Atlantic waters. Caesar orders his army to build a Roman fleet, though his men are primarily landsmen with little naval experience. The resulting sea battle near the mouth of the Loire River is a disaster for the Veneti. The Romans use hooks on long poles to pull down the Gallic ships' rigging, leaving them helpless. Caesar shows no mercy to the defeated Veneti. He has their senate executed and sells the survivors into slavery. This brutality sends a message throughout Gaul. Resistance to Rome brings not just defeat, but annihilation. Now Caesar pushes even further. In 55 BCE, he crosses the Rhine River into Germania itself, building a bridge across that formidable barrier in only 10 days. It is a marvel of military engineering, a demonstration of Roman power designed to intimidate the Germanic tribes who have been raiding Gaul. Caesar spends 18 days in Germania, establishing that Rome can reach anywhere, then returns to Gaul and destroys his bridge behind him. That same year, he launches the first Roman expedition to Britain. He crosses the Channel with 2 legions, landing on the shores of an island that exists in Roman imagination more as myth than reality. The Britons resist fiercely. The weather turns foul. Caesar withdraws after less than a month, but returns the following summer with 5 legions and 2,000 cavalry. This second invasion penetrates deeper into Britain. Caesar defeats several British tribes, establishes tribute relationships, then withdraws again before winter. Britain will not truly become part of the Roman Empire for another century, but Caesar has planted the Roman eagle on that mysterious island. His name is now attached to conquests that seemed impossible. He has gone where no Roman general has gone before. Punished, but the cost of these conquests is staggering. Modern historians, looking at the numbers Caesar provides in his commentaries on the Gallic Wars and archaeological evidence, estimate that over 1 million Gauls died in these campaigns. Another million were sold into slavery, their lives destroyed, their families torn apart, their futures obliterated. Entire tribes were slaughtered. Settlements were burned. The social fabric of Gaul was ripped to shreds. Caesar writes about these atrocities with clinical detachment, describing massacres and enslavements as simple facts of war. When Germanic tribes trying to migrate into Gaul surrendered to Caesar, he invited their leaders to negotiate, then seized them and slaughtered their entire people as they tried to flee. His own officers were horrified. Cato the Younger back in Rome declared that Caesar should be handed over to the Germanic survivors to face justice for war crimes. But war crimes is not a concept Rome truly understands or cares about when applied to barbarians. The Senate votes Caesar a supplicatio of 20 days, a public thanksgiving to the gods for his victories, the longest ever decreed. Caesar sends dispatches back to Rome, detailing his conquests in such compelling prose that they are copied and distributed throughout the city. The Roman people read about his adventures with breathless fascination. He is making Rome richer and more powerful with every campaign. The plunder from Gaul flows into his coffers, allowing him to pay his massive debts and enrich his officers and soldiers. His legions, through 8 years of constant warfare, have become the most experienced and lethal fighting force in the Roman world. They worship Caesar. He leads them from the front, shares their hardships, knows many of them by name. He shows concern for their welfare and rewards them generously for their service. They would follow him anywhere. They would fight anyone. Their loyalty to Caesar surpasses their loyalty to Rome itself. In 52 BCE, that loyalty is tested when Gaul explodes in a massive revolt. A young Gallic noble named Vercingetorix, a man of remarkable courage and intelligence, succeeds where others have failed. He unites dozens of Gallic tribes under a single banner, creating a coalition army that poses the greatest threat Caesar has faced in Gaul. Vercingetorix employs scorched earth tactics, burning Gallic settlements and crops to deny Caesar's army supplies. He avoids direct battle with the Roman legions, knowing that open-field combat favors Roman discipline. He attacks Caesar's supply lines and vulnerable detachments. For a time, it seems that Vercingetorix might actually drive the Romans out of Gaul. Caesar suffers a significant defeat at Gergovia, where an assault on Vercingetorix's fortified position fails disastrously. Nearly 700 Roman soldiers die, including 46 centurions. Gallic tribes that had allied with Rome begin to defect to Vercingetorix. The conquest teeters on the edge of collapse. Then, in September, Vercingetorix makes a fatal decision. He retreats to the hilltop fortress of Alesia with his army and waits for relief forces to arrive from across Gaul. Caesar recognizes this as his opportunity. He surrounds Alesia with lines of fortifications, building a ring of walls, trenches, and obstacles around the entire hilltop. Then, knowing that a massive Gallic relief force is coming, he builds a second ring of fortifications facing outward. When the relief army arrives, estimated at over 200,000 warriors, Caesar's 60,000 soldiers are trapped between two much larger forces. The siege becomes a battle on two fronts. The Romans fight from behind their fortifications against overwhelming numbers, attacking from inside and outside simultaneously. For several days, the outcome hangs in balance. Then Caesar commits his cavalry reserves at exactly the right moment, breaking the relief army's attack. The Gauls flee. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix realizes he has lost. He has his warriors sent out to surrender. They are sold into slavery. Then Vercingetorix himself dresses in his finest armor, rides down from Alesia, and surrenders to Caesar in person. Caesar imprisons him. 6 years later, during Caesar's triumph in Rome, Vercingetorix will be paraded through the streets in chains, then strangled in the Mamertine prison as tradition demands. Colonization at Alesia breaks the back of Gallic resistance. Some tribes continue fighting for another year, but without Vercingetorix's unifying leadership, they are defeated piecemeal. By 50 BCE, all of Gaul has submitted to Roman authority. Caesar has accomplished what Roman generals had dreamed of for centuries. He has conquered Gaul entirely, extending Rome's territory to the Rhine and the Atlantic Ocean. The wealth he has gained is enormous. The military reputation he has earned is unmatched. His 8 legions are battle-hardened veterans who have complete faith in their commander's genius. Caesar is now one of the 2 most powerful men in Rome, rivaling even Pompey the Great. But power breeds jealousy, and jealousy breeds fear. In Rome, while Caesar conquered Gaul, the political situation has deteriorated dangerously. Crassus, the 3rd member of the triumvirate, died in 53 BCE fighting the Parthians in Syria. His death removes the buffer between Caesar and Pompey. Julia, Caesar's daughter and Pompey's wife, died in 54 BCE, severing the family bond between the 2 generals. Pompey has grown increasingly uncomfortable with Caesar's rising power and glory. The Senate, dominated by optimates who hate Caesar, whispers poison in Pompey's ear. They remind him that Caesar's command in Gaul is temporary, that it will end soon, that Caesar will have to return to Rome eventually. When he does, they say, he should return as a private citizen, without his army, so he can face trial for the illegal acts he committed during his consulship. Caesar knows what awaits him if he obeys: prosecution, exile, or death. His enemies will destroy him the moment he loses the protection of military command. He requests permission to run for consul while absent from Rome, maintaining his legal immunity. The Senate refuses. He offers compromises. He will disband his army if Pompey simultaneously disbands his. The Senate refuses. In late 50 BCE, the situation reaches a crisis. The Senate, backed by Pompey, orders Caesar to disband his legions and return to Rome alone. Tribunes friendly to Caesar veto the order. The Senate declares martial law and passes the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, essentially declaring Caesar a public enemy. The tribunes flee Rome in disguise and travel to Caesar's camp. They arrive with the news. Rome has declared war on him. He must choose: surrender and face destruction, or fight back and plunge Rome into civil war. Caesar has never walked away from a fight in his life. But this is different. This is not a war against Germanic tribes or Gallic rebels. This is war against Rome itself, against the Senate, against Pompey, his former ally, his former son-in-law, one of the greatest generals Rome has ever produced. Caesar stands at the boundary of his province, the Rubicon River, with 1 legion. Roman law forbids any general from crossing that river with an army. To do so is treason. It is war. It is the point of no return. On one side of the river lies legal extinction. On the other lies civil war and all its horror. Caesar hesitates on the bank, weighing his options, calculating his chances. Then he makes his choice. The die is cast. The die is cast. Unpredictor. The night is cold along the Rubicon River, that unremarkable stream marking the boundary between Cisalpine Gaul and Italia. Frost clings to the grass, stars burn in the January sky overhead, ancient and indifferent to the drama unfolding on the earth below. Caesar stands on the northern bank with the 13th Legion, the same men who fought beside him in Gaul, who crossed the Rhine into Germania, who stormed the walls at Alesia. They wait in formation, silent, except for the clink of armor and the occasional stamping of feet against the cold. They do not fully understand why they are here, why their general has brought them to this particular river, on this particular night. But they trust him, absolutely. Where Caesar leads, they will follow. The ancient sources disagree on what happens next. Suetonius claims Caesar uttered the phrase that will echo through history, alea iacta est, the die is cast. Plutarch says Caesar spoke in Greek, quoting the poet Menander, aneryphtho kubos, let the die be thrown. Caesar's own commentaries, strangely, make no mention of the Rubicon at all, skipping over this moment of decision entirely. Perhaps the absence speaks louder than any words could. Perhaps, when writing his account of the civil war, Caesar found he could not adequately capture the weight of that moment, the knowledge that he was breaking the most fundamental law of the Republic, that he was transforming himself from Rome's servant into Rome's enemy. What is certain is this: Caesar gives the order. The legion marches. They wade through the shallow water, weapons held high, standards raised. On the southern bank, they form up again on Italian soil. And Caesar is now, by every legal definition, a rebel and a traitor. The constitutional government of Rome has ordered him to surrender. He has refused. He has brought an army into Italy. This is insurrection. This is civil war. There is no going back. Caesar's decision forces a stark choice on everyone in the Roman world. The Senate and Pompey represent legal authority, the constitutional order, 5 centuries of republican tradition. Caesar represents illegality, military power, the rule of force over the rule of law. Yet the situation is more complex than simple legality suggests. The Senate has manipulated laws and traditions to trap Caesar, using legal mechanisms as weapons. Pompey has amassed his own military power in ways that stretch constitutional boundaries. The Republic itself has been dying for decades, torn apart by civil wars, corrupted by wealth, unable to govern an empire that stretches from Spain to Syria. Caesar is not destroying the Republic so much as delivering the killing blow to an institution already mortally wounded. News that Caesar has crossed the Rubicon reaches Rome on January 15th. Panic erupts. Wild rumors circulate about the size of Caesar's army. People speak of 10 legions, 15, 20. They imagine battle-hardened veterans from Gaul sweeping down on Rome like an unstoppable tide. In reality, Caesar has only 1 legion with him, roughly 5,000 men. But he moves with his characteristic speed. While Rome panics, Caesar seizes one town after another in northern Italy. Most open their gates without resistance. Caesar enters each settlement with mercy and clemency. He does not sack towns or slaughter inhabitants. He tells the people he comes not as a conqueror, but as a defender of Rome against an oligarchic Senate that has subverted the constitution. He paints himself as the champion of the people and the tribunes whose rights have been violated. Pompey, caught completely unprepared, makes the decision that will ultimately cost him everything. He abandons Rome. He evacuates the consuls and most of the Senate to Brundisium, then crosses the Adriatic Sea to Greece. His strategy is sound. He needs time to raise and train armies from the eastern provinces where his influence is greatest. Italy cannot be defended against Caesar's veterans. Better to retreat, regroup, and return with overwhelming force. But the optics of the retreat are disastrous. Pompey, the great general, the man the Senate chose to save the Republic, flees without fighting. Caesar portrays this as cowardice. More importantly, Caesar seizes Rome without a battle. He enters the city in April with a single legion and immediately begins consolidating power. He secures the state treasury, overriding tribunician vetoes to seize the gold stored in the Temple of Saturn. When the tribune opposes him, Caesar dismisses him with contemptuous words about how easy it is to kill versus to threaten to kill. The man who claimed to be defending tribunician rights reveals the iron fist beneath his velvet rhetoric. Still, Caesar is careful. He does not slaughter his enemies. He does not declare himself dictator immediately. He appoints himself consul for the year and begins putting Rome's administrative machinery under his control. Then, rather than pursue Pompey immediately, he turns west towards Spain. Unauthorized religious legions in Spain are formidable, commanded by experienced officers. If Caesar pursues Pompey to Greece, these Spanish legions could invade Italy from the west, cutting his supply lines and threatening his rear. Caesar cannot allow that. He marches into Spain with 6 legions and fights a brilliant campaign around the town of Ilerda. Rather than assault the well-fortified Pompeian positions directly, Caesar uses maneuver and logistics to trap his opponents. He cuts them off from supplies and water. The Pompeian legions, realizing they are beaten, surrender. Caesar accepts their surrender with famous clemency. He does not execute the enemy commanders. He does not sell the soldiers into slavery. He allows the Pompeian legions to disband and return home if they wish, or join his forces if they prefer. Many choose to serve Caesar. The speed and mercy of the Spanish campaign wins Caesar praise throughout the Roman world. He returns to Italy in the autumn of 49 BCE, having secured his western flank in a single campaign season. In Italy, he secures his power base further. The Senate, or what remains of it, appoints him dictator to oversee elections. This is technically a constitutional position meant for emergencies, though Caesar's holding of it stretches tradition. He uses the 11 days of his dictatorship to get himself and Publius Servilius Isauricus elected as consuls for 48 BCE. Then, resigning the dictatorship, he prepares for the confrontation he can no longer avoid. Pompey waits across the Adriatic with 9 legions, a massive fleet, and the resources of the eastern provinces. The Senate in exile supports him. Nearly all of Rome's conservative elite have joined Pompey's cause. In the cold arithmetic of military power, Pompey should win. He has more men, more ships, more money, secure supply lines, and the advantage of defensive ground. Caesar has fewer soldiers, no fleet to speak of, and must cross hostile waters to reach his enemy. Everything favors Pompey. But Caesar possesses 2 advantages that cannot be counted in numbers. First, his soldiers are the veterans of the Gallic Wars, the finest troops Rome has ever fielded. They have absolute faith in their commander's tactical genius. Second, Caesar never allows his enemies to dictate the pace of events. In January 48 BCE, against all advice and strategic sense, Caesar loads 7 of his legions onto transports and crosses the Adriatic in winter, when no sane commander would attempt such a crossing. The Pompeian fleet, not expecting an attack in winter, is caught off guard. Caesar lands his troops on the coast of Epirus in modern Albania, catching Pompey by surprise. But Caesar's daring has outrun his caution. His general Mark Antony, with 4 more legions, is stuck in Brundisium, unable to cross because Pompey's fleet now blocks the straits. Caesar has split his forces, and Pompey has twice as many men on the ground in Greece. For months, the 2 armies maneuver around each other. Caesar tries to trap Pompey at Dyrrachium, building elaborate siege works around Pompey's fortified camp. But Pompey's supply lines by sea remain open, and he has more men to defend the perimeter. In a fierce battle, Pompey breaks Caesar's siege lines and forces him to retreat. It is Caesar's most significant military defeat. He loses over 1,000 men. Pompey's officers celebrate, convinced that Caesar is finished. Some say this is the moment Pompey could have ended the war. If he had pursued Caesar's retreating army aggressively, he might have destroyed it. But Pompey hesitates, perhaps remembering the danger of underestimating Caesar. That hesitation proves fatal. Crimson withdraws south into Thessaly, a region of Greece rich in grain and supplies. Pompey follows, under increasing pressure from the senators in his camp, who accuse him of prolonging the war to maintain his power. They want battle. They want the decisive victory that will crush Caesar once and for all. Pompey knows that time favors him, that patience will starve Caesar's smaller army and allow reinforcements to arrive. But the political pressure becomes unbearable. Against his better judgment, Pompey commits to giving Caesar the battle he has been seeking. The armies converge near the town of Pharsalus. The stage is set for the largest battle between Roman armies in history, the battle that will decide the fate of the Roman world. On the morning of August 9th, 48 BCE, the two armies face each other across the plain. Pompey commands approximately 45,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry. Caesar has only 22,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry. Pompey's strategy is straightforward. His massive cavalry advantage, stationed on his left wing, will sweep around Caesar's right flank, get behind the Roman line, and attack from the rear. It is a sound plan that has worked countless times in military history, but Caesar has fought enough battles to anticipate this tactic. Behind his cavalry on the right wing, screened from view, he stations 6 cohorts of his finest infantry, about 3,000 men, with specific orders to fight as if they were pikemen, targeting enemy cavalry directly rather than throwing their javelins. The battle begins. The infantry centers crash together with the sound of splintering shields and screaming men. On the flanks, exactly as Caesar predicted, Pompey's cavalry charges. Caesar's outnumbered horsemen give way, retreating as planned. Pompey's cavalry pursues, sensing victory. Then Caesar's hidden cohorts reveal themselves and attack. They do not throw their javelins at the approaching horsemen. Instead, they thrust them directly at the faces and eyes of the cavalry. The psychological effect is devastating. Cavalry, seeing infantry advancing aggressively toward them rather than forming defensive positions, break and flee. They have never encountered this tactic before. The charge dissolves into panic. With Pompey's cavalry routed, Caesar's hidden cohorts swing around Pompey's exposed left flank. Caesar commits his third line of reserves, fresh troops who have not yet entered the fight. They attack Pompey's left and rear while the exhausted center is still locked in combat. Pompey's army, attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, begins to crumble. Pompey himself, standing in his camp watching his plan collapse, suffers what appears to be psychological breakdown. He walks back to his tent in a daze, strips off his armor, and flees on horseback with a small escort as his army disintegrates around him. Without their commander, Pompey's legions break. Some flee to the hills, others surrender. The rest are cut down in the rout. When the killing finally ends, approximately 6,000 of Pompey's soldiers lie dead. Caesar's losses are around 1,200. The survivors of Pompey's army, about 24,000 men, surrender the next morning. Caesar treats them with the same clemency he showed in Spain. The ordinary soldiers are allowed to go home or join his forces. Even the senators and officers who fought against him are pardoned. Marcus Junius Brutus, who fought for Pompey despite Caesar pardoning his father's killer, receives Caesar's pardon and will later become one of Caesar's closest protégés. Cicero, who joined Pompey's cause reluctantly, is forgiven. Caesar says he fights not to destroy his fellow Romans, but to save them from their own mistakes. This policy of mercy becomes famous as Caesarian clementia, and it is both genuine magnanimity and brilliant political strategy. Every man Caesar pardons becomes a living advertisement for his clemency. Every act of mercy makes resistance seem futile and surrender honorable. But Caesar walks the battlefield of Pharsalus with deep emotion. He surveys the bodies of dead senators, patricians, men he knew in the Forum, who drank with him, who served alongside him. According to Plutarch, Caesar speaks to them as he walks among the corpses. They would have it thus. They drove me to this necessity. There is genuine sorrow in his voice, mixed with vindication. He did not want this civil war. He tried to compromise. They chose to destroy him rather than allow him to keep his dignitas, his honor and standing. This is the price of their choice. These Roman corpses on foreign soil, this catastrophic defeat of the Republic's defenders, This is what happens when ambition and fear overcome reason and compromise. Punitives flees to Egypt, hoping to find sanctuary with the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII, whose father Pompey had supported years before. But Ptolemy's advisors, calculating that Caesar will be the victor and seeking his favor, murder Pompey as he steps ashore. They cut off his head and preserve it to present to Caesar as a gift. When Caesar arrives in Alexandria 3 days later, Ptolemy's men bring him Pompey's head. Caesar, according to the sources, turns away and weeps. He had planned to pardon Pompey, to show mercy to his former ally and colleague. Now someone else has denied him that magnanimity. He orders Pompey's head to be given honorable burial and erects a shrine to his former colleague. Whether Caesar's tears are genuine grief, political theatre, or a mixture of both, only Caesar knows. But the message is clear. Caesar is the sole master of the Roman world now. The civil war is effectively over. The Republic has fallen. Yet Caesar lingers in Egypt. Something about this land, its young queen, and its possibilities captures his attention. The winter winds make sailing dangerous, he tells his officers, but that is not the whole truth. The whole truth involves a 21-year-old woman who will shortly smuggle herself into his presence, wrapped in a carpet, and change everything. The Queen of the Nile. Paved, the Alexandria that Caesar enters in October of 48 BCE is unlike any city in the Roman world. It gleams white and gold beneath the Egyptian sun, its famous Pharos lighthouse towering over the harbor, one of the 7 wonders of the world. The great library contains hundreds of thousands of scrolls, the accumulated knowledge of centuries. The streets are wider than Rome's, the architecture more grand, the wealth more ostentatious. This is the capital of the Ptolemaic kingdom, the last of the great Hellenistic dynasties that emerged from Alexander the Great's empire. It is also, as Caesar will quickly discover, a viper's nest of court intrigue, dynastic murder, and ruthless ambition. The current crisis involves siblings Cleopatra VII and Ptolemy XIII, who rule as joint monarchs according to their father's will. They are also married to each other, following the Ptolemaic tradition of brother-sister marriage, designed to keep power and divinity within the family. But marriage does not guarantee harmony. Cleopatra and Ptolemy loathe each other. Ptolemy, only 13 years old, is controlled by 3 powerful advisors: the eunuch Pothinus, the general Achillas, and the rhetorician Theodotus. These men have engineered Cleopatra's removal from power, driving her out of Alexandria. She has been forced to flee to the Egyptian-Syrian border, where she gathers an army, preparing to reclaim her throne by force. When Caesar arrives, Egypt teeters on the edge of civil war. Ptolemy and Cleopatra's armies are days away from clashing in battle. Conservative, and a man who has just defeated Pompey, largely through Egyptian grain and resources, decides he will arbitrate the dispute. He sends word to both Ptolemy and Cleopatra that they should come to Alexandria to present their cases. He will decide who rules Egypt. It is a breathtaking assertion of Roman authority over a theoretically independent kingdom. But Egypt is drowning in debt to Rome, and military force gives Caesar the right to impose his will. Ptolemy returns to Alexandria easily. Cleopatra faces a more difficult problem. Ptolemy's forces control the approaches to the city. If she enters openly, she will likely be arrested or killed before she can reach Caesar. She needs a stratagem, something unexpected and dramatic that will get her into Caesar's presence before her enemies can react. The famous story says that Cleopatra arranges to be rolled up in a carpet or cloth sack and smuggled into the palace by a loyal Sicilian merchant named Apollodorus. The merchant requests an audience with Caesar, claiming he brings a gift. The guards allow him through. In Caesar's chambers, Apollodorus unrolls the carpet, and Cleopatra emerges at Caesar's feet. The story is probably true, or close to true, because it appears in multiple ancient sources and fits perfectly with what we know of Cleopatra's character: bold, theatrical, willing to risk everything for a chance at power, and smart enough to understand the value of making a memorable first impression. Caesar is 52 years old, grey-haired though balding, lean and battle-scarred, arguably the most powerful man in the world. Cleopatra is 21, intelligent, multilingual, and desperate to reclaim her throne. The ancient sources tell us she is not conventionally beautiful, but possessed of a captivating voice, sparkling conversation, and an intellect that could match wits with anyone. Plutarch writes that it was her irresistible charm in conversation and the attractiveness of her personality, not physical beauty, that made her so compelling. She speaks 9 languages fluently, including Egyptian, which no Ptolemaic monarch in generations has bothered to learn. She understands Egyptian religion and culture in ways her Greek ancestors scorned. She is, in short, everything that makes for a fascinating political partner and potentially dangerous rival. Whether Caesar is seduced by Cleopatra's charms or recognizes her as a valuable political ally, or both, he decides in her favor almost immediately. He summons Ptolemy and his advisors to a meeting and announces that Cleopatra and Ptolemy will rule together as joint monarchs, as their father intended. Ptolemy's advisors are furious. Pothinus begins spreading rumors among the Alexandrian mob that Caesar plans to make Cleopatra sole ruler. The situation spirals out of control. Achillas, Ptolemy's general, marches on Alexandria with 20,000 soldiers. Caesar finds himself trapped in the palace quarter with only 4,000 men, cut off from reinforcements, surrounded by a hostile city. This is not the triumphal entry of a conqueror. This is an ambush, and Caesar has walked directly into it. Bangkok-Carian War that follows lasts from November 48 BCE to March 47 BCE. Caesar fights not in open field battle, but in the narrow streets and alleys of Alexandria, house-to-house combat, where his tactical genius and his legion's discipline are minimized. Ptolemy's forces control most of the city and the harbor. They fight with desperate intensity, knowing that Caesar's victory means their own destruction. At one point, Caesar nearly drowns. During a naval battle in the harbor, Caesar's ship is boarded by Egyptian soldiers. Caesar dives into the water and swims for his life, holding important documents above the waves with one hand while swimming with the other, an image that becomes famous in Roman art and legend. The tide turns when reinforcements arrive from Syria, led by Caesar's ally Mithridates of Pergamum. Caesar breaks out of his siege in Alexandria and marches to join this relief force. At the Battle of the Nile in March 47 BCE, Caesar defeats the combined forces of Ptolemy and Achillas. Ptolemy himself drowns in the Nile while trying to flee, weighed down by his golden armor. Achillas is killed in the fighting. Pothinus is executed. The Alexandrian War ends with Caesar victorious and Cleopatra restored to the throne. To maintain the fiction of joint rule, Caesar has Cleopatra marry her youngest brother, Ptolemy XIV, who is only 12 years old and poses no threat to her power. Egypt is now effectively ruled by Cleopatra alone, with Roman backing ensuring her position. But Caesar does not leave Egypt immediately after securing his victory. Though his officers urge him to pursue the remaining Pompeian forces, though civil war continues in North Africa and Spain, though Rome needs his attention, Caesar lingers in Egypt for months. The official excuse is that the Etesian winds make sailing dangerous. The real reason is Cleopatra. Caesar and Cleopatra embark on an elaborate cruise up the Nile, traveling in royal barges with 400 ships in attendance. They voyage deep into Egypt, seeing the ancient monuments and temples, experiencing the wealth and grandeur of this ancient civilization. For Caesar, raised in the narrow streets of Rome's Suburra, it must have been intoxicating to see a land where civilization stretched back 3,000 years, where pharaohs had ruled as living gods long before Rome existed. The relationship produces a son. On June 23, 47 BCE, Cleopatra gives birth to Ptolemy XV, who will be known by the nickname Caesarion, meaning Little Caesar. Cleopatra claims Caesar as the father, and Caesar does not deny it. He cannot formally acknowledge the boy under Roman law, which forbids marriage to foreigners and regards Caesar as already married to Calpurnia. But Caesar allows Cleopatra to name the child after him, a tacit acknowledgement of paternity. If Caesarion truly is Caesar's son, he is Caesar's only male biological heir. Caesar's previous marriage to Cornelia produced only a daughter, Julia, who died young. Now, at 52, Caesar has a son born of the Queen of Egypt, a boy who might one day rule both Rome and Egypt if the political stars align correctly. Punching, but Caesar cannot stay in Egypt forever playing pharaoh. Dispatches arrive from all corners of the Roman world demanding his attention. Pharnaces, king of Pontus and son of Rome's old enemy Mithridates, has invaded Roman territory in Asia Minor, taking advantage of the civil war to reclaim lands his father lost. Caesar marches to confront him in May 47 BCE. The campaign is brief and brilliant. At the Battle of Zela, on August 2nd, Caesar defeats Pharnaces so quickly and completely that he sends his famous report to Rome. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. The phrase captures Caesar's essence perfectly. Speed, decisiveness, and an absolute confidence in his ability to overcome any challenge. He does not boast of hard-won victories or brutal struggles. He simply states the facts. He arrived, observed the situation, and crushed his enemy. The brevity of the phrase itself demonstrates the brevity of the campaign. From Asia Minor, Caesar travels to Rome, arriving in September 47 BCE after an absence of 3 years. He finds the city in chaos. Soldiers and veterans are rioting, demanding their promised bonuses. Political factions scheme against each other. The Republic's traditional institutions have collapsed, leaving a power vacuum that only Caesar can fill. He must restore order, address the legitimate grievances of his soldiers, punish his enemies, reward his friends, and establish a new political structure for Rome. It is an overwhelming task. Caesar tackles it with his characteristic energy. He pays bonuses to his soldiers. He redistributes land to veterans. He appoints new magistrates. He reorganizes provincial administration. He begins the transformation of Rome from a republic that governs through Senate consensus to a state that governs through the will of one supremely powerful individual. In October 46 BCE, Caesar celebrates 4 triumphs, the traditional Roman victory parades for successful generals. 1 triumph for his conquest of Gaul, 1 for the Alexandrian War, 1 for the victory over Pharnaces, 1 for his African campaigns against the remaining Pompeians. It is an unprecedented display of military glory. The triumphs last for days, with captives paraded through the streets, treasure displayed for the cheering crowds, and exotic animals from across the empire exhibited for the amazed populace. Vercingetorix, who has spent 6 years imprisoned awaiting this moment, is paraded in chains before being strangled in the Mamertine prison, as tradition demands. It is a reminder that Caesar's mercy has limits, that enemies who resist too long or too effectively face grim fates. Positioned the midst of these celebrations, Cleopatra arrives in Rome. Caesar installs her in his villa across the Tiber, along with Caesarion and her younger brother-husband, Ptolemy XIV. Her presence causes scandal and fascination in equal measure. Romans gawk at the exotic Egyptian queen with her foreign clothes, her court of eunuchs and advisors, her casual assumption of divine status. Caesar dedicates a golden statue of Cleopatra as Venus in his new Forum Iulium, associating his foreign mistress with the goddess from whom he claims descent. Some see this as Caesar declaring Cleopatra a goddess. Others see it as Caesar declaring himself descended from divinity through Venus. Either interpretation outrages traditional Romans who believe in keeping gods and mortals separate. But Caesar seems unconcerned with Roman propriety. He has Cleopatra sit beside him at public events. He consults with her on Egyptian affairs. He allows her to participate in political discussions in ways no Roman woman would be permitted. Whether Caesar genuinely loves Cleopatra or simply values her as a political partner and intellectual equal is impossible to determine. The relationship serves both their interests. Caesar gains Egyptian wealth and stability in the eastern Mediterranean. Cleopatra gains Roman military protection and the assurance that Egypt will not be annexed by Rome during her lifetime. They may genuinely care for each other, but that affection rests on a foundation of mutual advantage. Because Caesar's enemies' propaganda, they whisper that Caesar wants to move the capital to Alexandria. They claim he plans to make himself king in the Eastern style, with Cleopatra as his queen. They point to Caesarion as proof that Caesar desires to establish a dynasty. These rumors help create the atmosphere of fear and resentment that will eventually lead to his assassination. But in 46 and 45 BCE, opposition to Caesar seems futile. He has defeated every enemy. He controls Rome absolutely. His legions worship him. The common people adore him for his generous distributions of grain and his spectacular public games. Only the old Republican diehards in the Senate plot in the shadows, nursing their resentment and waiting for their chance. Undergoing Caesar eventually sends Cleopatra back to Egypt before his Spanish campaign against the last Pompeian forces. She returns to Alexandria, Caesarion, and her nominal co-ruler, Ptolemy XIV, who will die mysteriously in 44 BCE, possibly poisoned on Cleopatra's orders. She makes Caesarion her co-ruler, announcing to the world that Caesar's son rules Egypt. Caesar cannot formally acknowledge this, bound as he is by Roman law and politics, but he does not deny it either. The situation remains deliberately ambiguous, allowing Caesar to maintain Roman propriety while Cleopatra uses their son to solidify her own power in Egypt. When Caesar returns to Rome after his final victory in Spain at Munda in March 45 BCE, he has achieved what no Roman before him has accomplished. He has defeated all his enemies. He controls every legion in the Roman world. The Senate is filled with his appointees. The magistrates are his creatures. Opposition has been crushed or co-opted. Caesar stands alone at the pinnacle of Roman power, answerable to no one, constrained only by his own ambitions and the limits of what Roman tradition will accept. He has become, in every way except title, a king. And that is when he begins to push too far. Master of Rome. The Rome that Caesar now dominates has changed beyond recognition from the republic of his youth. The Senate still meets, but it has swollen from 600 members to 900, packed with Caesar's appointees, including men from Gaul and Spain who speak Latin with thick accents. The old patrician families who dominated Roman politics for centuries now share power with newcomers from across the empire, men who owe their advancement to Caesar alone. The traditional cursus honorum, the ladder of offices through which ambitious men climbed, still exists, but Caesar appoints magistrates directly, sometimes years in advance, reducing elections to formalities. The Republic's institutions survive, but they have become theatrical props in a performance where only one actor truly matters. Caesar holds the title of dictator, appointed initially for 10 years in 46 BCE, then for life in early 44 BCE. This position, dictator perpetuo, violates every principle of republican government. The dictatorship was designed as a temporary emergency measure, lasting 6 months at most, granted to a single individual when Rome faced existential crisis. Caesar has transformed it into permanent autocracy. He justifies this by pointing to the continuing instability, the threat of renewed civil war, the need for strong leadership to restore order. But everyone knows the real reason. Caesar will not relinquish power because power is what he sought his entire life. And now that he possesses it absolutely, he will not let it go. Yet Caesar does not simply rest on his laurels and enjoy his supremacy. He possesses a restless, driving energy that compels him to act, to reform, to improve, to build. He pours himself into transforming Rome and its empire with the same intensity he brought to conquering Gaul. The reforms come rapid fire, each one addressing some long-standing problem or corruption. He conducts a census of Rome's population, the first comprehensive count in decades, discovering the city has grown far larger than anyone realized. He reduces the grain dole from 320,000 recipients to 150,000, eliminating fraud and corruption in the distribution system, while simultaneously founding new colonies abroad where landless poor can settle and farm. Some 80,000 Roman citizens migrate to these new settlements, relieving pressure on Rome's crowded streets while spreading Roman culture and power throughout the empire. The most famous of Caesar's reforms is his calendar. The Roman calendar has been a disaster for generations, a lunisolar system that requires periodic adjustments by priests who often manipulate it for political advantage, adding or removing days to extend or shorten the terms of friendly or hostile magistrates. By Caesar's time, the calendar has drifted 3 months out of alignment with the solar year. Caesar, with the help of the Alexandrian astronomer Sosigenes, designs a new solar calendar with 365 days divided into 12 months, with an extra day added every 4 years to account for the 6-hour discrepancy. This Julian calendar is a masterpiece of practical astronomy. It will remain in use throughout the Roman Empire and medieval Europe, only slightly modified by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582 to create the Gregorian calendar we use today. The month Quintilis, in which Caesar was born, is renamed Julius in his honor, giving us July. Caesar's calendar is a gift to civilization that will outlast his empire by more than a millennium. He reforms the courts, removing corruption and political interference that had made Roman justice a mockery. He establishes new procedures for trials and expands the jury pool beyond senators to include equestrians, ensuring that justice is not purely a matter of who has the most influential friends. He passes laws against luxury and extravagance, attempting to rein in the ostentatious displays of wealth that have become commonplace among Rome's elite. He limits the amount of jewelry women can wear and restricts the use of litters and sedan chairs, trying to restore older Roman values of modesty and simplicity. These sumptuary laws are largely ignored, but they show Caesar attempting to address the moral decay he sees around him. He orders the draining of the Pontine Marshes and Fucine Lake, massive public works projects that will reclaim vast amounts of farmland and reduce malaria-carrying mosquitoes. He plans a new harbor at Ostia to improve Rome's grain supply. He begins construction of a basilica in the Forum that will be the largest building of its kind. He starts work on a new forum, the Forum Julium, to supplement the old Roman Forum that has become impossibly crowded. He orders the construction of a great library to rival Alexandria's, with Marcus Terentius Varro appointed as the first curator, tasked with collecting Greek and Latin texts. He plans to codify the entire corpus of Roman law, a project that will not be completed until the reign of Emperor Justinian, 6 centuries later. Caesar extends Roman citizenship to communities in Cisalpine Gaul and to deserving individuals throughout the empire, recognizing that Rome's strength lies in assimilating conquered peoples rather than keeping them as perpetual subjects. He establishes colonies at Carthage and Corinth, cities Rome destroyed in the 2nd century BCE, rebuilding them as thriving Roman settlements. He reforms the calendar for debt, requiring creditors to accept land at its pre-war value to discharge debts, providing relief to thousands of Romans crushed by usurious interest rates during the civil wars. He increases the size of the Senate and expands the number of magistrates elected each year, creating more opportunities for ambitious men while diluting the power of any individual senator. Quitting reforms are real, substantive, beneficial. They address genuine problems that have plagued Rome for generations. They make the empire more efficient, more just, more stable. Caesar is not simply a military conqueror, but an administrator of genius. He understands systems and how to improve them. He sees problems clearly and implements solutions decisively. Had he stopped here, had he been content to be the first citizen, the most powerful senator, the guiding force behind a renewed republic, he might have died in bed, surrounded by his grateful grandchildren. But Caesar does not stop. Perhaps he cannot stop. Power attracts power, and absolute power attracts absolute honors. The Senate, desperate to curry favor and fearful of offending him, begins heaping unprecedented honors upon Caesar. They decree that his statue should stand in all the temples of Rome. They vote that his image should appear on coins while he is still living, something no Roman has ever been granted. They proclaim him Pater Patriae, Father of the Fatherland. They vote him the right to wear a laurel wreath at all times, ostensibly to hide his baldness, but symbolically marking him as perpetually triumphant. They grant him a golden throne in the Senate House, upon which he sits while senators stand. They decree that the month of his birth should be renamed July in his honor. Some senators propose that he be made dictator for life. Caesar accepts this final honor in early 44 BCE, cementing his position as permanent autocrat. These honors horrify traditional Romans who remember when their ancestors expelled the kings. The golden throne looks like a royal throne. The laurel crown resembles a crown of kingship. The image on coins mimics the practice of Hellenistic kings who put their faces on currency. The title Dictator Perpetuo is kingship in all but name. Rumors circulate that Caesar plans to have himself declared king officially, that at the next Senate meeting a proposal will be made to proclaim him Rex, king, at least in the provinces, if not in Italy itself. Some claim Caesar wants to move the capital to Alexandria or Troy, abandoning Rome entirely. Others say he plans to marry Cleopatra officially, making her his queen and Caesarion his heir, setting aside Roman law entirely. How much of this is true and how much is paranoid fantasy is impossible to determine. Caesar never takes the title of king. He refuses it publicly when Mark Antony offers him a crown during the festival of Lupercalia, though some observers note that the refusal seems half-hearted, as if Caesar is testing public reaction. He certainly behaves as if he considers himself above normal Roman citizens. When a delegation of senators approaches to offer him new honors, Caesar remains seated rather than standing to greet them as custom demands. This is a shocking breach of protocol. Romans are obsessed with proper forms and gestures. A senator who does not stand when equals approach is stating through action that he does not consider them his equals. He is declaring himself superior. The insult burns in the hearts of proud senators who remember when the Republic was governed by collective wisdom rather than one man's whim. Caesar also shows signs of megalomania that disturb even his supporters. He speaks of himself in the third person, saying, "Caesar thinks," and "Caesar decides," rather than using the first person. He accepts divine honors, allowing temples to be built in his name and priests to be appointed to his cult. The line between honoring a great man and worshipping a god has always been fuzzy in Rome, but Caesar seems to be stepping firmly into divine territory. Some senators remember that Caesar traced his ancestry to Venus through Aeneas. Is he now claiming to be descended from divinity in more than just poetic fancy? Is he setting himself up as a living god in the manner of Eastern monarchs? Mark Antony, Caesar's most loyal general, is appointed his co-consul for 44 BCE. But even Antony's loyalty has limits. He can see the gathering storm. He warns Caesar repeatedly to be more careful, to show more respect for republican traditions, to avoid provoking the senators who still have pride even if they have lost power. Caesar brushes off these warnings. He has survived assassins before. He has walked through war zones where every bush might hide an enemy. He escaped death 100 times in Gaul. Why should he fear senators armed only with words and wounded dignity? He tells his friends that he has lived enough. If death comes, let it come quickly and unexpectedly. Better to die in an instant than waste away from disease. This casual attitude toward his own safety would be admirable in a young soldier. In the most powerful man in the world, surrounded by desperate men who see him as a tyrant, it is suicidal folly. The conspiracy begins to form in the shadows. Gaius Cassius Longinus, who fought against Caesar at Pharsalus and was pardoned, watches Caesar gather all power to himself and feels nothing but contempt. He remembers the Republic when the Senate governed collectively, when no single man could dominate Rome, when ambition was checked by law and tradition. That Republic is dying, and Cassius knows who is killing it. He begins quietly reaching out to like-minded senators, men who value republican virtue over monarchical power, men who remember what Rome used to be before Caesar made himself its master. Marcus Junius Brutus poses a more complex problem. Brutus is Caesar's protégé, one of the men Caesar trusts most. Caesar pardoned Brutus after Pharsalus, despite Brutus fighting for Pompey. Some whisper that Caesar is actually Brutus's father, that his mother Servilia was Caesar's mistress when Brutus was conceived. Whether or not this is true, Caesar has shown Brutus extraordinary favor, appointing him to high office and treating him almost as a son. But Brutus is also the descendant of Lucius Junius Brutus, the Roman who expelled the last king from Rome 5 centuries ago. That ancestor's name weighs heavily on the young man. Anonymous messages appear, left on his door, scratched on walls, saying, "You are no true Brutus," and "Brutus, are you sleeping?" The implication is clear. His ancestor saved Rome from tyranny. Will he do the same? Cassius approaches Brutus carefully. He knows that Brutus loves Caesar, but also loves the Republic. He plays on Brutus's sense of duty, his family heritage, his philosophical commitment to virtue and justice. If Caesar truly plans to make himself king, Cassius argues, then killing him is not murder, but the highest form of patriotism. It is saving Rome from tyranny. It is defending the Republic that 500 years of Roman blood built. Brutus wrestles with this moral dilemma for weeks. Finally, he agrees to join. With Brutus committed, the conspiracy gains legitimacy. Brutus is known as an honorable man, a student of philosophy, a man of principle. If Brutus believes this is just, other good men will believe it too. The conspiracy grows, eventually reaching 60 or even 70 senators. That so many men can keep the secret is remarkable and speaks to how widespread the hatred of Caesar has become among the senatorial class. They include men like Decimus Brutus, one of Caesar's closest friends and most trusted generals. They include Gaius Trebonius, another of Caesar's loyal officers. They include Tullius Cimber and Servilius Casca and dozens of others, men who fought for Caesar or were pardoned by Caesar or were promoted by Caesar. Their motives vary. Some genuinely believe they are saving the Republic. Some seek revenge for personal slights. Some fear for their own positions if Caesar lives long enough to redistribute all power to his favorites. Some are opportunists who smell blood in the water. But all agree on one thing: Caesar must die. They settle on the Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BCE, as the date. Caesar is scheduled to leave Rome on March 18th to campaign against the Parthians, the Eastern Empire that destroyed Crassus's legions years before. This will be Caesar's last Senate meeting before his departure. If the conspirators do not act now, they will lose their chance. Caesar will leave with his loyal legions, win glory against Parthia, and return more powerful than ever. It is now or never. The conspirators make their plans meticulously. They will strike during the Senate meeting at the Theatre of Pompey, where the Senate is meeting while their regular chamber undergoes renovation. They will station Decimus Brutus's gladiators nearby, to protect them if Caesar's guards intervene. Each conspirator will conceal daggers beneath his toga. They will surround Caesar during the meeting and stab him together, so that no single man bears the blame, but all share the glory of tyrannicide. They will kill the tyrant in front of the entire Senate, making it clear this is not murder, but lawful execution of a dictator who has subverted the constitution. Everything is ready. The weapons are hidden, the speeches are prepared, the justifications are rehearsed. All that remains is for Caesar to walk into the trap. And despite every warning, despite every omen, despite his wife's tears and the soothsayer's prophecy and his friends' pleas, Caesar does exactly that. On the morning of the Ides of March, as the sun rises over Rome, Caesar dresses in his finest toga, places his laurel crown upon his head, and sets out for the theatre of Pompey. He walks toward his destiny and his doom. Beware the Ides of March. The soothsayer Spurina stands on a street corner as Caesar passes, calling out in a loud voice, "The Ides of March have come!" Caesar stops and looks at the old man, that famous smile playing on his lips. "Aye, they have come," he replies, "but they have not gone." He continues walking, flanked by his attendants and friends, completely unaware that he has just spoken his own epitaph. The Ides have come indeed, but for Caesar, they will never end. This day will be frozen in time forever, the moment when the Republic died and the Empire was born in blood and betrayal. Calpurnia has spent the night in terror. Her dreams showed Caesar's body broken and bleeding in her arms, showed the pediment of their house collapsed in ruins, showed disaster coming on wings of night. She begged him not to go to the Senate, pleaded with him to stay home just this one day. The priests examined the entrails of sacrificial animals and found no heart, the worst possible omen. Spurina the Haruspex warned that danger would not pass until the Ides had ended. But Decimus Brutus arrived at the house and convinced Caesar to attend. Decimus, one of the conspirators, tells Caesar that the Senate has gathered specifically to honor him, that they plan to vote him new powers and dignities. To stay away would be an insult. Caesar cannot show fear or weakness. He must go. At the theatre of Pompey, the Senate assembles. The conspirators take their positions, trying to appear calm while their hearts pound in their chests. Each man has concealed a dagger beneath his toga. Some carry multiple blades, insurance in case one is lost or broken in the struggle. They have gone over the plan repeatedly. When Caesar is seated, Tullius Cimber will approach with a petition to recall his exiled brother. When Caesar refuses, Cimber will grab his toga as a signal. Then all will strike together, overwhelming Caesar before he or his guards can react. Gladiators loyal to Decimus Brutus wait in the portico, ready to protect the conspirators if fighting breaks out. Everything depends on speed and surprise. Pruca, Porcia, wife of Marcus Brutus and daughter of Cato the Younger, knows what her husband plans to do. She has kept the secret, though the knowledge nearly destroys her. On this morning, anxiety overwhelms her. She faints in the house, overcome with dread. Servants rush to help her. Brutus receives word, but can do nothing. He is already at the theatre, dressed in his senatorial toga, the dagger cold against his skin. He thinks of his ancestor, Lucius Junius Brutus, who founded the Republic by expelling the king. He thinks of Caesar, who treated him like a son. He thinks of Rome, which needs saving. His hands tremble slightly as he takes his position among the other conspirators. Cassius paces nervously, scanning the crowd for signs that the plot has been discovered. At any moment, he expects Caesar's guards to burst in and arrest them all. He has told the other conspirators that if their plan is discovered, they should turn their daggers on themselves rather than face capture and torture. Death with honor is preferable to a traitor's execution. But no guards come. No alarm is raised. Caesar enters the theatre surrounded by senators, offering congratulations and petitions. He walks through the crowd, greeting men by name, accepting their honors with that easy charm that has won him so many followers. He suspects nothing. What Caesar does not know is that someone tried to warn him. A Greek teacher named Artemidorus wrote a detailed note listing all the conspirators and their plan. He pushed through the crowd outside the theatre, trying to reach Caesar, calling out that he has critical information the dictator must read immediately. But Caesar is surrounded by petitioners, all claiming urgent business. Artemidorus's note is handed to Caesar, who tucks it into his toga, meaning to read it later. Inside that folded piece of papyrus is a list of every man who plans to kill him. If Caesar had read it, the entire course of history would have changed. But he does not read it. He enters the theatre, takes his golden seat, and the conspirators close around him like wolves circling prey. Julius Caesar approaches first, kneeling before Caesar with his petition to recall his exiled brother. Caesar waves him away. This is not the time for such matters. Caesar persists, grabbing the hem of Caesar's toga. "This is violence," Caesar exclaims, trying to pull away. It is the signal. Servilius Casca strikes first, stabbing at Caesar's neck, but the blow is off target and only wounds him. Caesar, that old soldier who fought in Gaul and led armies across rivers and mountains, reacts instantly. He grabs Casca's arm and drives his stylus, the metal pen he was using to sign documents, into Casca's arm like a dagger. Then all the conspirators descend upon him. Daggers flash in the morning light streaming through the theatre's windows. Caesar fights, punching, kicking, trying to wrestle weapons away from his attackers, but there are too many. Cassius stabs him in the face. Another conspirator strikes his thigh. Another hits his ribs. Caesar spins and turns, trying to defend himself, but blades come from every direction. The senators, watching from their benches, sit frozen in horror. Some of the conspirators injure each other in their frenzy to reach Caesar. Brutus finally strikes, though accounts differ on where his blade lands. Some say he stabbed Caesar in the groin, a symbolic blow against the man who may be his father. Others say he struck at Caesar's chest or back. The exact wound does not matter. What matters is that Brutus has struck. When Caesar sees Brutus with a bloodied dagger, something breaks inside him. According to Suetonius, Caesar says nothing, though some claim he spoke in Greek. "Kai su, teknon." You too, child? Shakespeare will immortalize the phrase in Latin, et tu, Brute. The words may or may not be historical, but the sentiment is clear. Caesar expected betrayal from enemies like Cassius, but Brutus, the young man he mentored and promoted, the son of his former lover, perhaps even his own son. That Brutus would join the conspiracy cuts deeper than any dagger. Caesar stops fighting. He pulls his toga over his head to hide his face from the blades and the world, and sinks to the floor. The conspirators continue stabbing, the blades rising and falling in a frenzy of violence. When they finally step back, Caesar lies crumpled at the base of Pompey's statue, the marble face of his former friend and rival looking down on him as his blood spreads across the floor. 23 wounds mark his body. Only one, the physicians later determine, was fatal. All the others were inflicted on a man already dying or dead, the conspirators ensuring that each could claim to have struck a blow against tyranny. Caesar's body lies in the theatre for several hours before anyone dares move it. The conspirators, covered in blood, rush out into the street crying, "Liberty! Freedom! The tyrant is dead!" They expect cheering crowds, grateful citizens ready to restore the republic. Instead, they find confusion and terror. People flee in panic, not understanding what has happened. Rome's citizens do not see liberators. They see blood-stained senators with drawn daggers. They see chaos and fear another civil war breaking out. The conspirators retreat to the Capitoline Hill, Caesar's blood still drying on their hands, and suddenly realize they have made a catastrophic error. They planned meticulously for the assassination, but not at all for what comes after. They assumed that killing Caesar would automatically restore the Republic. They believed Romans would rally to their cause once the tyrant was dead. But they have no plan for governing. They have no military force to back them. They have not neutralized Caesar's supporters, who control all the legions. They killed the king, but forgot that kingdoms do not simply cease to exist when their monarch dies. Power abhors a vacuum, and Caesar's death creates the greatest power vacuum Rome has ever known. Three men emerge from the chaos to contest for supremacy. Marcus Antonius, Caesar's loyal general and co-consul, immediately seizes control of the situation. He occupies Caesar's house, secures his papers and his fortune, and most importantly, gets control of Caesar's will. In that will, which Caesar wrote just months before his death, Caesar bequeaths 3/4 of his vast fortune to his 18-year-old grandnephew, Gaius Octavius, who is studying in Greece. Caesar adopts Octavius posthumously, making the teenager his legal son and heir. Caesar also leaves 300 sestertii to every Roman citizen and grants his gardens to the people of Rome as a public park. When Antony reads this will at Caesar's funeral, the crowd erupts in grief and rage. Caesar, even in death, proves himself more generous to Rome's common people than any senator ever was. Antony delivers the funeral oration, and it is a masterpiece of political manipulation. He does not need to incite the mob directly. He simply reads Caesar's will, displays Caesar's bloody toga with its 23 wounds, and reminds the people of everything Caesar gave them: land, games, conquests, glory, and now a fortune. Shakespeare's version, where Antony says, "I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him," and then proceeds to destroy the conspirators through praise, captures the essence of what happened. By the time Antony finishes speaking, the Roman mob is howling for blood. They attempt to storm the conspirators' houses. They burn the Senate house where Caesar's body is laid out. Brutus and Cassius flee Rome, recognizing that their noble tyrannicide has become murder in the eyes of the people. The liberators have become fugitives. The Senate, desperate to prevent civil war, grants amnesty to the assassins. But this solves nothing. Antony controls Rome's urban legions. Octavius, arriving from Greece, claims his inheritance and his adoptive father's name, becoming Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. The assassins flee to the eastern provinces, raising armies from those territories. For 2 years, Rome teeters on the edge of another civil war, until finally it erupts in full fury. At Philippi in Greece, in October 42 BCE, the armies of the conspirators face the armies of Antony and Octavian. The battle is chaos and slaughter. Cassius, thinking the day is lost, orders his freedmen to kill him. Brutus survives the first battle, but loses the second weeks later. Rather than face capture, he runs onto a sword held by a friend. His last words, according to Plutarch, are a quote from the poet Euripides. "O wretched virtue, you were but a name, and yet I worshipped you as real indeed. But now, it seems, you were but fortune's slave." With Brutus and Cassius dead, the last hope of restoring the Republic dies with them. Antony and Octavian rule as triumvirs, dividing the Roman world between them, along with Marcus Lepidus, though Lepidus is quickly marginalized. For a decade, they maintain an uneasy alliance. Then Antony makes his fatal mistake. He allies with Cleopatra, who has survived Caesar's death and remained Egypt's queen. Antony and Cleopatra become lovers, political partners, and co-rulers of the Eastern Mediterranean. They have children together. Antony divorces his Roman wife, Octavian's sister, to marry Cleopatra. He declares Caesarion, now a teenager, to be Caesar's true son and legitimate heir. This directly threatens Octavian, whose entire claim to power rests on being Caesar's adopted son and heir. War between Antony and Octavian becomes inevitable. It culminates in September 31 BCE at the Battle of Actium, where Octavian's fleet under Admiral Agrippa destroys the combined Roman-Egyptian fleet of Antony and Cleopatra. Antony and Cleopatra flee to Alexandria. Octavian pursues. In August 30 BCE, with Octavian's forces entering Alexandria, Antony receives false news that Cleopatra has died. He falls on his sword, but botches the suicide, dying slowly and painfully. He is carried to Cleopatra, who has barricaded herself in her mausoleum. He dies in her arms. Days later, Cleopatra takes her own life, the method disputed, but traditionally said to be poison from an asp. With her death, the Ptolemaic kingdom ends. Egypt becomes a Roman province, and Octavian orders the execution of Caesarion, eliminating Caesar's only biological male heir. Too many Caesars, Octavian's advisor says, is not good. Blindness. In 27 BCE, Octavian formally restores the Republic, handing power back to the Senate, while keeping enough authority to ensure he remains the most powerful man in Rome. The Senate grants him a new name, Augustus, meaning the revered one. He becomes, in effect, Rome's first emperor, though he is careful never to call himself king or dictator. He rules as princeps, the first citizen, but everyone understands he is supreme. The republic that Caesar destroyed will never be restored. The empire that Caesar's blood birthed will endure for 5 centuries in the West and another 1,000 years in the East. The assassins killed Caesar, hoping to save the republic. Instead, they ensured its permanent death. The legend that never dies. Enraged. On the morning of March 16, 44 BCE, as dawn breaks over Rome, slaves scrub Caesar's blood from the marble floor of Pompey's theatre. The Senate in exile debates what to do next, their grand gesture of tyrannicide already curdling into murder. In Egypt, Cleopatra receives news that will shatter her world. In Gaul, Caesar's veterans learn that their beloved commander is dead and begin sharpening their swords for revenge. Across the Mediterranean, in every province and client kingdom, people hear the news and wonder what comes next. The most powerful man in the world is dead, killed by the very Senate he dominated, and Rome stands at the edge of an abyss that will swallow the Republic forever. History moves in strange patterns. The men who killed Caesar believed they were restoring republican virtue and collective governance. Instead, they proved that the Republic was dead already, that it could not survive without a single strong hand at the helm. They wanted to turn back time to an idealized past that probably never existed. They accomplished the opposite, ensuring that Rome's future would be ruled by emperors claiming descent from Caesar. The assassins saved nothing and doomed everything. Their failure teaches a harsh lesson. You cannot restore something already broken by simply destroying the person who broke it. Systems and societies change. Institutions evolve or die. The Rome Caesar inherited was dying when he was born. He did not kill it. He simply delivered the final blow to a corpse that still pretended to be alive. Flooding. Caesar's legacy is impossibly complex, a mixture of extraordinary genius and overreaching ambition, genuine achievements and catastrophic failures, mercy and brutality. He conquered Gaul and brought millions of people under Roman civilization, spreading Latin language and Roman law and infrastructure that shaped Western Europe for millennia. He also slaughtered over 1 million people and enslaved another million, crimes so massive that even Romans who admired his military skill were appalled. He reformed Rome's calendar, giving humanity a gift that endures 2,000 years later. He also subverted 500 years of republican tradition and replaced collective government with autocracy. He showed clemency to defeated enemies, pardoning men who fought against him and appointing them to high office. He also accumulated so much power that he made himself indispensable, and indispensable men attract daggers. As a military commander, Caesar ranks among the greatest in history. Alexander the Great, Hannibal, Napoleon, a handful of others belong in his company. But Caesar's campaigns were marked by speed and decisiveness that even Alexander did not match. He moved armies faster than seemed possible. He appeared where enemies did not expect him. He fought battles when conventional wisdom said he should retreat. He crossed rivers thought uncrossable and built fortifications thought impossible. His soldiers worshipped him because he led from the front, shared their dangers, knew their names, rewarded their loyalty. The Gallic Wars showcased his tactical genius. The Civil War demonstrated his strategic brilliance. Pharsalus remains studied in military academies as an example of how a smaller force with superior leadership can defeat a larger army through innovation and audacity. As a statesman, Caesar's record is more mixed. His reforms were genuine and beneficial. The calendar, the legal reforms, the extension of citizenship, the founding of colonies, the reduction of debt, the public works, all improved the lives of ordinary Romans and strengthened the empire's foundations. But his concentration of power was corrosive. By appointing all magistrates, controlling all legions, dominating the Senate, and accepting divine honors, he made clear that republican institutions no longer mattered. One man ruled Rome. That might have been necessary given the Republic's collapse, but Caesar made no effort to rebuild constitutional government. He created a system where everything depended on his will and his life. When assassins' daggers took his life, they plunged Rome into civil war because no structure existed to contain the power vacuum. Augustus, learning from Caesar's mistakes, will create a constitutional framework that allows the Principate to endure. Caesar died before he could build anything that would outlast him, except his name. 863. As a person, Caesar remains enigmatic even after 2,000 years of study. The ancient sources agree on certain traits. He was exceptionally intelligent, a gifted writer and speaker, quick-witted in conversation. He was charming and could win over enemies with a smile and a joke. He was generous with friends and forgiving to defeated foes. He was also ruthlessly ambitious, calculating every move for political advantage, willing to plunge Rome into civil war rather than accept humiliation. He claimed to value honor and dignitas above all else, but what he really valued was power and glory. He wanted to be remembered as Rome's greatest son. In that, at least, he succeeded. The name Caesar becomes synonymous with supreme authority. After Augustus establishes the Principate, every subsequent Roman emperor uses Caesar as part of his title. When the empire splits, both East and West maintain the tradition. The Byzantine emperors call themselves Caesar for 1,000 years. When the Germanic kingdoms emerge from Rome's ruins, their rulers adopt the title Kaiser, a German pronunciation of Caesar. The Russian Tsars take their title from Caesar. The very word emperor in countless languages derives from or is associated with Caesar's name. This man who refused to be called king ensured that his name would mean king for the rest of human history. His writings endure as classics of Latin literature. The Commentarii de Bello Gallico, his account of the Gallic Wars, remains required reading for Latin students and military historians. Written in clear, precise prose, with careful attention to detail and subtle propaganda woven throughout, Caesar's commentaries are simultaneously historical accounts, political justifications, and literary masterpieces. His Commentarii de Bello Civili, describing the Civil War from his perspective, is equally valuable. These works show us Caesar as he wanted to be seen, decisive, merciful, compelled to war by his enemy's aggression, fighting not for personal power, but to defend the rights of tribunes and the Roman people. The texts are brilliantly crafted propaganda, but they also contain genuine historical information found nowhere else. Through Caesar's own words, we understand his campaigns in ways impossible for commanders who left no written accounts. The question of Caesar's intentions remains disputed. Did he want to be king? Did he plan to move the capital to Alexandria and rule as an Eastern monarch? Was he becoming a tyrant drunk on power? Or was he simply trying to create a new constitutional framework for governing an empire too large for the old republican institutions? The evidence supports multiple interpretations. Caesar accepted divine honors and titles that looked like kingship in everything but name. But he also refused the title of king when offered, and never formally claimed divine status beyond what any prominent Roman might claim through mythical ancestry. He concentrated all power in his person, but he might have planned to distribute that power more widely once stability was restored. He appointed hundreds of new senators and magistrates, which could be either packing the government with loyalists or genuinely expanding Roman government to include more of the empire's population. We will never know Caesar's ultimate intentions because assassins' daggers prevented him from revealing them. On the Ides of March, 44 BCE, at 56 years old, Caesar was cut down before he could complete his work or clarify his vision. The campaign against Parthia, which might have brought him the glory of conquering Rome's greatest enemy, never happened. The legal reforms and public works he planned remained unfinished. The political settlement he might have created died with him. We are left with a half-completed life, a story cut short before the final chapter, a legend that will never know how it might have ended differently. But perhaps that is fitting. Perhaps Caesar was always meant to die at the height of his power, rather than fade into old age. Perhaps the dramatic end, betrayed by men he trusted and loved, bleeding out beneath Pompey's statue, adds the final necessary element to make his story immortal. Heroes in epic poetry die young and glorious, not old and forgotten. Achilles chose a short life with eternal fame over a long life in obscurity. Caesar, by dying as he did, joined the ranks of mythic heroes whose stories never fade. He became more than a man, he became Caesar. Grinding is that Caesar's assassins killed him to save the Republic, but in doing so, they ensured its permanent death. Had Caesar lived, he might have restored some republican forms after achieving stability. Augustus, learning from Caesar's fate, presented himself as restoring the Republic even while establishing permanent autocracy. But with Caesar dead and the state plunged into civil war, restoration became impossible. The question changed from, how do we govern Rome, to who will rule Rome? From that moment forward, Rome would be ruled by emperors. Caesar's death did not save the Republic. It killed any chance that republican government might be preserved in some form. 2,000 years later, we still debate Caesar. Was he a tyrant who destroyed republican freedom? Was he a visionary who recognized that the Republic's time had passed and created something better? Was he a military genius whose personal ambition happened to align with Rome's destiny? Was he a criminal whose conquest of Gaul constituted genocide by any reasonable standard? Was he a hero who saved Rome from itself, or the villain who destroyed Rome's most precious values? The answer, maddeningly, is that he was all of these things simultaneously. He was a man of extraordinary abilities and extraordinary flaws, who accomplished extraordinary deeds and committed extraordinary crimes, who rose from poverty to supreme power, who conquered nations and reformed calendars, who showed mercy to enemies and brutalized innocents, who loved Rome and destroyed the Republic, who lived 56 years and achieved immortality. Stand today in Rome at the spot where Caesar fell, in the ruins of Pompey's theatre. The exact location of his death is buried beneath modern streets, but archaeologists believe they have found it. On the Ides of March, people still leave flowers there, paying homage to a man who died more than 2,000 years ago. His name is known to every educated person on Earth. His month, July, appears on every calendar. His story has been told in countless plays, films, books, and songs. Shakespeare immortalized him. Napoleon studied him. Countless military leaders have tried to emulate him. Countless politicians have claimed his mantle. He shaped the world we inherited. The Roman Empire he helped create transmitted Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian religion across Europe, forming the foundation of Western civilization. Latin, the language Caesar spoke and wrote so brilliantly, evolved into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. English borrowed extensively from Latin. The very words we use to discuss power and government and law come from Rome. Caesar's life teaches us about ambition and achievement, about the heights to which human capability can rise and the costs of reaching those heights. He shows us that one person, through intelligence and will and ruthless determination, can reshape history. But he also shows us that such reshaping comes at a terrible price. The millions of dead in Gaul, the Republic's destruction, the civil wars, the assassinations, the blood and chaos and suffering, all of that is Caesar's legacy too. He gave us so much and took away so much in equal measure. On that morning in July 100 BCE, when an infant boy drew his first breath in the cramped streets of Rome's Subura district, no one could have predicted where that life would lead. The baby became a boy who defied dictators. The boy became a young man who won military glory. The young man became a politician who mastered Rome's treacherous political waters. The politician became a general who conquered an entire region. The general became a rebel who crossed a river with his army. The rebel became a dictator who held absolute power. The dictator became a corpse on a theater floor. The corpse became a god. The god became a legend. The legend became immortal. This is the story of Gaius Julius Caesar, descendant of kings and goddesses, conqueror and reformer, tyrant and savior, murderer and statesman, genius and villain. A man who spent his entire life climbing from the bottom of Rome to its very top, only to discover that the top is where men fall furthest. A man who wanted glory and achieved it at the cost of everything else. A man who changed the world so thoroughly that we still live in the world he made. A man who became, and will remain forever, Caesar. His name echoes through the centuries, through empires and kingdoms, through languages and cultures, through the endless march of history that continues long after all of us are dust. Julius Caesar, who lived 56 years in the flesh, but will live forever in memory. Julius Caesar, who proved that one man can change everything. Julius Caesar, whose legend will never die. The die was cast, the Rubicon was crossed, the Republic fell, the Empire rose. And Caesar stands at the center of it all, frozen at that moment when he pulled his toga over his head and sank beneath 23 daggers, dying but already immortal. A man who lost his life but won eternity. This is his story. This is his legend. This is Caesar.